Vanessa Clark is my name. I'm 52 years old, and this morning I'm sitting at my dining room table with a bruise spreading across my left cheek like a horrible twisted flower and a broken lip. My husband used the back of his hand to bruise my face last night, and I remained silent. I just stood there, tasting my own blood and experiencing a fiery sting all over my flesh. However, Terence's smile disappeared as soon as he came downstairs this morning, expecting me to cower and submit like I always did. Spotted, who was sitting at my table. His expression, which was a mix of fear and bewilderment, nearly made the tears I shed in the dark worthwhile. If you think that no woman should ever have to go through what I'm about to describe, please hit the like button immediately and leave a comment below stating where city you're viewing from before I tell you what happened. I need to know that I'm not the only one going through this. I need to know that there is someone who knows what it's like to be deeply in love, that you lose yourself totally. Don't miss any of my stories by subscribing. There are tales of women who had to break before they could rise. I live in Charleston, South Carolina. You know the kind of establishment I'm talking about. Historic area. Old row homes with front porches and shutters. Like the ghosts of the past, Spanish moss hangs from the oak trees. This place is lovely. It's almost excruciatingly lovely. The kind of beauty that covers the awful things happening behind closed doors. I'm a school librarian, been for 23 years. Books, tales of heroes and villains, and the triumph of good over evil have surrounded me throughout my existence. I never imagined that one of those stories would be my reality. I never imagined that I would be the split-lip lady attempting to survive her own husband. I've been married to Terence for 18 years. 18 years old. Just us, no kids. We used to claim to be each other's entire universe. As it happens, the person who becomes your everything can also become your worst nightmare. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Let me paint you the image of this morning first, and then I'll take you back to show you how we got here. My dining room table this morning resembled something from a magazine. I'm not even making this up. With our wedding in China, I had stated it. We never utilized the gift set since it was too special, delicately trimmed in gold on white plates. The sort of thing you're scared to breathe. My finest white tablecloth would be set out. The person holding the hand, my grandmother, made the embroidered edges. She worked on that tablecloth for months. Every stitch a labor of love. I arranged fresh flowers. Gardenias from my backyard. Gardenias. I carried the same flowers on the day of our wedding. I could see the irony. I had prepared a feast. A southern breakfast that would make any granny proud. My grandmother showed me how to melt cheese grits with strong cheddar, golden and fluffy scrambled eggs with cream, thick sliced bacon, crispy on the edges, buttermilk, tall, flaky biscuits made from scratch. The top sparkled from the butter brushing. On a tray were strawberries, cantaloupe slices, and fresh fruit. My Cuisinart coffee maker is brewing coffee. That stainless steel one I bought myself last Christmas because Terence thought it was a waste of money. The whole home was filled with the stench. Coffee, butter, and something else. Decide, resolve, the scent of a lady who had reached her breaking point. I sat with my back to the head of the table. My hands were folded in my lap, and I was upright. I had my hair put back in a tight bun, my grandmother's pearl earrings in my ears, and my navy dress, the basic one I worn to my mother's burial 3 years prior. Before I sat down, I glanced in the hall mirror and hardly recognized the lady who was staring back at me. The bruise on my cheek was dark purple now, spreading from my cheekbone down to my jaw. When his palm caught on my tooth, my lip became swelled and split in the middle, linked. I had the appearance of a combat-experienced warrior. And in a way I was. I heard him upstairs, his phone alarm going off, the water running, and that same grating beep he had been using for 15 years. I waited while I sat there. I could hear my heart thumping so loudly in my ears. My hands, however, were stable. My hands were finally solid after everything, including the dread, tears and shame. His footsteps sounded on the stairs at 8:05. Strong, self-assured footsteps, the steps of a man who believed he had won. Wearing khakis and a polo shirt for the weekend, he entered the dining room. The shower had left his hair still wet. I observed his face as he glanced at the table. Confusion was the first thing that occurred. His brows furrowed as he glanced from the meal to me and back again. Then his gaze focused on my face. On my split lip, on the bruise he'd left there. You know what he did too? He smiled. Not one of remorse or embarrassment, but one of contentment, one that, pulling out his chair, he sat down like a monarch surveying his realm and declared, "Finally I got through to you." He grabbed a biscuit and studied it as if it were a trophy. I watched him chew after he took a bite. He stated it when I saw the crumbs fall from his mouth onto my grandmother's tablecloth. The statements that validated all of my suspicions regarding his transformation. "You've learned at last, huh?" His tone was informal, almost joyous, with a hint of discipline. "And see, do you still know how to be a wife?" He chuckled. In fact, I laughed. "This is how it should have been all along, baby. All you had to do was figure out who was in command." I didn't say anything. I simply observed him consuming my croissant. I saw him smirk self-satisfiedly and recline in his chair. He didn't know. He had no notion that the floor was going to collapse beneath him. He had no notion that the woman seated across from him was not the same one he had smacked the previous evening. Then, precisely at 8:12, the doorbell rang. That simple sound, ding-dong, pierced through the morning air like a knife. I saw his expression shift. His jaw tensed when the smile wavered. "Who the hell is that?" With a look of annoyance on his face, he set down the biscuit. As I mentioned, I didn't want any company during the weekend. "Who did you invite without asking me, Vanessa?" I got to my feet slowly and purposefully. I adjusted my clothing with my hands, and I looked him right in the eyes. I said, "I invited them." "You're going to sit," I said in a cool, collected tone. "Wait there." I made my way to the front entrance. Every step seemed like I was marching toward my freedom. His eyes were touching my back. Could feel his bewilderment evolving into something more. Perhaps anxiety, fear. Good. He finally experienced what I had for the past 3 years. They were there when I opened the door. Lisa Hartwell, a detective in uniform, with her badge shining in the morning sun. My sister Denise is already crying, and Pastor Jerome, dressed in a black clergy shirt and white collar, has a somber and dejected expression, flowing down her face, her hand grasping her pocketbook like it was a lifeline. I could see the glint of anger in each of their eyes as they examined my face, the bruise, and my broken lip. However, they remained silent. They simply trailed me into the dining area. I swear to God, Terence's face went completely white when he saw them enter. In an instant, he changed from brown to grey. He dropped the biscuit he was holding, and it clattered softly against the porcelain dish before rolling onto the table and disintegrating into fragments. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I saw dread in his eyes for the first time in 3 years when he turned to face me. Actual, sincere fear. His voice was choked as he finally said, "Vanessa. What? What is this? What's happening?" I didn't take a seat again. I remained upright, facing him across the table with my hands by my sides. Denise and Pastor Jerome were standing to my right. To my left, Detective Hartwell stood with her hand idly resting on her belt next to her handcuffs. There was still symbolism on everyone present in that space. I spoke this in a chilly, steady voice. "Terence, this is the repercussion you've been avoiding for the past 3 years. This is the time for reckoning. However, I'm getting ahead of myself once more. You must know our narrative in order to truly comprehend how we arrived at this point and the reasons behind my actions. You must understand Terence's past self and his current state. I didn't always have a split lip, and you should know that. When he raised his voice, I didn't always recoil. Once upon a time, I thought his voice was the most beautiful thing in the world. This digital picture frame is on the counter next to the coffee maker in my kitchen. It was a Christmas present from my niece 2 years ago. It is an automatic presentation of the past that alternates between images. And those photos continued to rush by as I prepared for the most significant day of my life this morning while preparing that breakfast. They were all like a stab to the heart. The initial image that appeared was taken on the day of our wedding. We looked so youthful, my God. I was 34, he was 36. I had a bouquet of gardenias in my hand and was dressed simply and elegantly in a cream dress. Terence was wearing a fine grey suit, and he had a sincere, joyful smile on his face. We were outside Bethlehem Church, where we had met at a book discussion group and where we had gone to church together for years. You could see all of our friends and family behind us as the sun shone. Everyone is grinning and thrilled for us. I recall that day like if it were yesterday. I recall believing that I was the luckiest woman alive. The following image was taken roughly 10 years ago. Terence was getting a Charleston County Teacher of the Year award. He was an excellent high school history teacher. He was adored by the children. He had a way of bringing the past to life and making them care about those who had passed away hundreds of years ago. He is clutching this plaque in the photo, and his smile is beaming with pride. He is dressed in the tie with the small books printed on it is my fave. In the photo, I'm standing next to him with my arm around his waist, gazing up at him as if he were the moon because, in my opinion, he was. He embodied all that I found admirable, intelligent, kind, and committed. To his students, he would often quote Frederick Douglass. When he got home, he would tell me about the children, the ones who were having difficulties, and how he was assisting them. He was concerned. He cared so much, God. Another image appeared. This one came from 8 years ago. There was a charity gala. Both of us served on the planning committee. I was in charge of a literacy program for children from disadvantaged backgrounds, and Terence was on the school board. We are both dressed up in the photo, with him wearing a tuxedo and me in a black evening gown. We're dancing. We are both laughing at something, and he has his hand on the small of my back. Although I can no longer recall what it was, I do recall the sensation. I recall feeling loved, safe, and adored. The word is that. Adored. Our life was good. A incredibly wonderful life. This historic district row home, 15 years ago we jointly purchased it. We made room-by-room repairs, but it still needed work. The hardwood flooring were refurbished by Terence himself. I picked out every curtain and painted every wall. We used to spend Friday evenings together at this small waterfront seafood restaurant. He would leave me love notes. I have small pieces of paper in my lunch bag. My queen, I hope you have an amazing day. He used to refer to me as his queen. I am sharing all of this with you, because I need you to comprehend. I'm not married to a monster. I was married to a decent man who turned into a monster. Observing it unfold daily. It was the most excruciating thing I have ever gone through. Even worse than my facial bruise. Not as good as the split lip. Observing a loved one vanish and be replaced by a person you fear. That type of hell is unique. 3 years ago, the change began. 3 years. At that point, everything collapsed. At that point, the man I married began dying, and someone else began to replace him. The accusation came first. A 17-year-old female student in her senior year. Terence was accused by her of making inappropriate contact. Claimed that during an after-school tutoring session, he inappropriately touched her. The charge was a bombshell to our lives. Terence was suspended pending an investigation after a day in which everything was as usual. I was aware that it was untrue. God, I was aware of it. That is not something Terence would ever do. An extensive investigation was conducted on him. The educational institution, everyone investigated it, including the board and the police. The case was dropped after 2 months of agony, during which there were whispers, rumors, and sidelong stares at the supermarket, totally disregarded. They discovered proof that she had fabricated it. She texted her pals to let them know she was upset with him for giving her a failing grade on a paper and threatened to hold him accountable. The girl was kicked out. The matter was resolved. Even when Terence was brought back, the harm had already been done. You are aware of the situation. It makes no difference if the accusation is later shown to be untrue. People recall the charge. The exoneration is forgotten by them. Parents began to withdraw their children from his classes. Suddenly, co-workers who had previously joined him for lunch had other arrangements. In a discreet request, the school board urged him to resign. They said that allowing things to calm down was for the district's benefit. He was sent to a different school on the other side of town. From the school where he had spent 15 years as a teacher, he went from a school where everyone knew him, where he was loved and respected, to one where he was just that teacher who was accused. The fact that he was innocent was irrelevant. There was the stain. The foundation of his adult life, his reputation, was ruined, and I saw him crumble under its weight. I initially believed he would recover. Terence was powerful. He was tough. However, the drinking began approximately 1 month after he went back to teaching. He claimed that all he needed to fall asleep at night was a glass of bourbon. Next, 2 glasses were involved. It was half the bottle after that. When he got home from school, he would immediately head to the liquor cupboard, wouldn't even get dressed beforehand. Simply pour 1 glass down it, then another. And the rage began. Not initially. He was initially merely depressed and hopeless. With his drink in hand, he would settle on the couch and gaze at nothing. But soon the melancholy turned bitter. It curled into an unsightly shape, and there had to be a target for that ugly thing. I was that target. It began modestly. It was so tiny that I hardly noticed taking place. Not much to say. Perhaps people might now believe me if you had spoken up more during the probe. At church, you're quite silent. It's likely that people believe you too have misgivings about me. You could have done a better job of defending me. I was always to blame, not the false girl. The school board did not desert him. Because I didn't do enough, it was my fault. Since I was insufficient. Then he began to exert authority. Little stuff. He initially seized charge of the finances, claiming that I was overspending and that we should exercise greater caution. He handed me an allowance and took my debit card. I spent $40 a week on groceries and other necessities. He accused me of being self-centered when I objected, claimed that he should be in charge of handling the finances as he was the one who worked full-time and had a higher salary than I did, and I allowed him because I believed it to be stress. God help me. After he got used to the new school, I thought, he would return to being the man I married after some time had gone. He began keeping me apart from my pals. He would comment whenever I wanted to go out. "You're going to tell your buddies about me." Like everyone else, I'm sure they all believe I'm guilty. Staying at home and avoiding the confrontation was easy. I thus stopped calling my sister, quit attending book club, and stopped having coffee with Lisa from church. The only way I could maintain some sense of serenity was to reduce my universe to just him and me. The initial true incidents occurred almost 2 years ago. I will never ignore it. I had prepared his favorite supper, meatloaf and mashed potatoes. He arrived home late, half intoxicated, and sat down at the table silently. I asked him about his day in an attempt to strike up a discussion. All he did was grumble. I inquired about the food's quality. "It's dry. The meatloaf is dry. You can't even cook anymore, can you?" he asked, staring at me with these icy eyes. I apologized and offered to prepare him something else if he so desired. At that point, he grabbed his platter and tossed it. At the wall, not at me. It broke the plate. Mashed potatoes and meatloaf fell down the wall and onto the ground. There is gravy everywhere. After surveying the mess, he turned to face me and ordered, "Clean it up." He then proceeded to the bedroom upstairs. I don't know how long I stood there, transfixed. After that, I cleaned it up using the paper towels. I cleaned the wall till the stain from the gravy was gone. I told myself it was the alcohol as I picked up every fragment of the shattered plate. The stress was the cause. It wasn't him. The man I married wasn't it. But it repeatedly occurred. Not every day. I began to live on eggshells since it happened frequently enough, but not every week. The sound of his car door closing when he arrived home taught me how to gauge his mood. A gentle close indicated that he was feeling fine. If I was slammed, I had to make myself scarce. I discovered what subjects to stay away from. Don't bring up the past. Don't bring up the charge. If he appeared exhausted, don't inquire about his day. Avoid breathing too loudly. It became physical for the first time about 18 months ago. Not hitting, that is. Close, but not quite. We were fighting over money. I hadn't asked him before getting my hair done. I spent $45 from my own salary. He went crazy when he saw the receipt. Began screaming that I was just like everyone else who had betrayed him, that I was self-centered, and that I didn't respect him. I made an attempt to leave. I expressed my desire to avoid a fight. With his fingers burrowing into my flesh, he firmly grasped my arm and pulled me back. "When I'm speaking to you, don't turn away." He gave a hiss. I smelled the bourbon on his breath, and his face was inches from mine. "You are not allowed to leave." He probably just held my arm for a few seconds, but it felt like forever. Red, finger-shaped marks appeared as he released his grip, and the following day they became bruises. Each finger has 5 little bruises. For a week I wore long sleeves. In July I told Lisa at the library that I felt cold in Charleston. I nearly left that evening. I made a bag. Terence entered the bedroom as I was filling it with my amenities while it was on the bed. His expression changed to one of panic as he glanced at the luggage. Panic, not rage. He dropped on his knees. He actually collapsed to his knees in front of me, sobbing and apologizing, saying he had no idea what had happened to him and that it would never happen again. He buried his face in my stomach, put his arms around my waist, and sobbed like a little kid. And God, please pardon me. I opened the bag. As he sobbed, I hugged him. I gave him a gentle pat on the hair and assured him that I was forgiving of him and that we would work through this together. Since wives do that, isn't that right? Isn't that what love is? Supporting your partner through difficult times. I had been taught that. That was my belief. However, it did occur once more. Naturally, it did, since I had demonstrated to him that there were no actual repercussions. I would forgive him even if he hurt me. He could frighten me, and I would remain. Thus, the limits continued to shift. The second time, he gripped me more firmly. Pushed me once, just enough to make me stumble, but not violently. Every time, there would be promises, tears, and apologies. And every time, I would believe him because I needed to think that the man I had married was somewhere inside this irate, resentful man. The verbal abuse intensified. He would make fun of me. School librarian. He would smirk. Such a significant job, spending the entire day reading to brats. I used to, at least. Something significant. He would contrast me with other females. Women who showed their husbands more support. Women who were adept at remaining silent. Women who were truly gorgeous. I don't want to confess how much that last one stung. I began to stay away from mirrors. Began dressing in more casual attire. I sensed that I was becoming smaller in every way. I made another attempt to depart almost a year ago. On the opposite side of town, I had discovered a listing for a tiny one-bedroom apartment. I went to examine it as part of my lunchtime. Despite its small size, just 400 square feet, it was quiet and had large windows. I could see myself filling out an application while enjoying a cup of tea in the morning sunshine and not worrying about my husband's attitude or jumping at the sound of a door closing. Terence discovered the application in my handbag that evening. He found it, though I'm not sure what he was searching for. When I got out of the shower, he was standing in the doorway of the bedroom with the paper in his hand. His jaw was clenched and his cheeks was flushed. "What is this?" His voice sounded dangerously low. I tightened my robe around my body. "I can no longer do this, Terence. We need some room, I believe. Space?" He uttered the word as if it were poison. "You want your hubby to give you space? Considering everything I've lost and everything I've been through, do you also wish to leave me?" I tried to sound cool as I said, "I'm not abandoning you. I simply believe that we both need some time to work things out. Perhaps if we..." He entered the room and said, "You're not going anywhere. Vanessa, you aren't going anywhere. My wife is you. For better or worse, you made a commitment, and simply because things deteriorated. Terence, if you think you can run, please. Where will you go?" Now he was moving toward me, and until my back struck the wall, I was backing up. "Who will believe you instead of me? What will you say to people? If your spouse occasionally treats you badly by raising his voice? Boo-hoo." Now he was just inches from my face. "You're not going anywhere. This is where you belong. I own you. You get it?" I was unable to talk. He turned and left after I simply nodded. He carried the application. In the kitchen, I heard him tear it up. I heard the fragments strike the garbage container. I took a seat on the bed's edge, and I came to a horrible realization. I became aware of my situation, that I had been waiting too long, that I was now considered property, something that belonged to the man who used to write me love notes. The months that followed were the darkest period of my life. I went to work, got home, made supper, and made an effort to blend in. I stopped laughing and grinning. In my own home, I felt like a ghost. Denise, my sister, with whom I used to speak once a week, began to inquire, "Are you all right, V? You have a distinct voice. Does Terence have a good life?" I would also lie, assure her that everything was all right. Simply worn out from work. Simply becoming older. I could hear the hesitation in her voice, even though she didn't push. Lisa, a book club buddy of mine, defaulters of a diquel. She also made an effort to connect. She has good intuition and works as a detective for the Charleston Police Department. About 6 months ago, in September, I was wearing a turtleneck when she noticed me at the grocery store. She gave me a serious look and inquired about my well-being. I also told her lies, claimed that I was battling a cold and didn't want to get chilled, She handed me her card and instructed me to contact her in case I needed anything at all. I attempted to forget about the card after placing it in my wallet, but I was unable to do so because things kept deteriorating. When Terence grabbed me, shoved me, or backed me into a corner, he stopped even feigning regret. Cold stillness reigned, as if this was the new normal for our marriage, and there were no more apologies or tears. And I began to think it was true. Began to believe that perhaps this was what I deserved, that perhaps I had let him down so badly that his rage was warranted. He began arriving home later, and later 3 months ago, and now he smells of cigarettes in addition to bourbon. Although he would resign 10 years ago while he was smoking, he would come in at midnight or 1 in the morning. I would pretend to be sleeping while I lay in bed, and listen to him smash into everything downstairs. He would wake up, go to bed without taking a shower, and faint. Alcohol, smoking, and other odors would permeate the entire bedroom. Fury. That's what anger would smell like if it had a scent. I stopped sleeping in our bed a month ago. I went to the guest room to sleep. I told him I had back pain, that the mattress's firmness was beneficial. He didn't even disagree. I doubt he gave a damn. I believe he was glad he didn't have to stare at me. To be honest, I was pleased not to have to lie next to him, but I was also wondering if today would be the night he did more than just grab me. That is, whether it would be the night it went too far. Then last night, when everything came crashing down. That night, I was able to see the reality clearly for the first time. I had been brewing tea in the kitchen. It was getting close to midnight. I had trouble falling asleep, fear rumbling in my abdomen. I was dressed in the burgundy silk robe that my sister had given me 3 years prior for Christmas. With the embroidered flowers on the sleeves, it's extremely lovely. I recall thinking it was odd that I felt so ugly on the inside while wearing something so lovely. I heard his car in the driveway while I waited for the kettle to boil at the counter. There was silence once the engine went out. I listened while holding my breath. The automobile door banged shut after opening. My stomach fell. A forceful slam was never good. His keys were in the lock when I heard them. Before he got it in, I heard him miss the keyhole several times. He was clearly intoxicated, more so than normal, based on his gait when the door opened. I was the first to notice the stench as he entered the kitchen. Cigarettes, perspiration, and bourbon. He had not tucked his shirt in. He had bloodshot eyes. When he glanced at me, I noticed something I had never seen before in his eyes, but nearly like hatred, but more sinister than rage. He didn't, first, say anything. The envelope was sitting there as I stepped up to the counter. An application for a different, less expensive apartment that I could afford with simply my wage was in the envelope I had printed off that morning. I had left it there after printing it out. Too exhausted to conceal it. Too exhausted to continue doing the part. Perhaps I wanted him to discover it. Perhaps a part of me wanted to push the issue. I noticed a shift in his expression as he picked up the envelope and peeked inside. Bewilderment to comprehension to outright fury. He took out the application and gazed at it. What on earth is this? He spoke softly. Risky. I began, but he interrupted me, Terran. Vanessa, what the devil is this? Now louder. An application for a flat. You're attempting to abandon me once more. I responded. I can no longer do this. I was trembling when I spoke. However, I forced myself to say it. This is not how I can live. I can't continue to be cautious. I can't continue to be scared in my own house. I'm heading out. I'm done, Terrence. The phrases lingered between us in the air. I briefly believed that he might let me go. Perhaps he had come to the realization that we were destroying each other and that nothing remained. However, his face contorted, and he repeatedly tore the application in half. He continued to tear until his hands were little more than confetti. He then hurled the shards in my direction. Like snow, they fluttered down. He said, "You're not going anywhere," in a cold voice. "Vanessa, I've already told you this. I own you. You are unable to go. Unlike everyone else, you are not allowed to leave me. I'm not going to leave you." I spoke, and the desperation in my voice was audible. I'm attempting to protect myself. Do you not see what has happened to us? Do you not realize that we are destroying one another? No, he answered, moving in my direction. I'm being destroyed by you. Everyone, including you. I've lost my career. I've lost my reputation. And now you want to take what's left of me. My house, my wife. Please, Terence. I attempted to plate him by raising my hands. I tried to soothe him, but he gripped my shoulders instead. He shook me, his fingers digging in excruciatingly hard, and he yelled, "You're not leaving," directly into my face. His spittle touched my cheek. I gasped and tried to back away, saying, "Do you hear me? You're not leaving. You're hurting me." But he continued, "Terence, stop. You're hurting me." My head snapped back and forth as he gave me a stronger shake. I was lightheaded and confused. I attempted to grab his hands off me, but he was far more powerful. I staggered backward when I did manage to yank away from him. I felt pain shoot through my side as my hip struck the counter's edge. He exclaimed, "Look what you made me do," while panting heavily. "This is your fault. If you'd just stay in line, if you'd just be a good wife, none of this would happen." "I am a good wife," I replied, and I had tears running down my cheeks. "I've been there for you through it all now. By means of the charge, through the drinking, through your rage. I've tolerated your cruelty and wrath, and have remained. However, I can no longer. I am unable to. Terence, you're killing me. Do you not see that? You're destroying my identity." And he did it at that moment. At that moment, he passed the uncrossable line. For a while, I thought he was going to grab me again as his hand came up. However, his hand continued to move. It appeared on my face. With a cracking sound, the back of his palm made contact with my cheek. Thunder in the quiet kitchen. The force of it turned my head to the side. My lip caught on my tooth and split open. I tasted blood instantly, metallic and warm. The pain was sharp and immediate, spreading across my face like fire. But worse than the physical pain was the realization he'd done it. After 3 years of pushing boundaries, of grabbing and shoving and backing me into corners, he'd finally hit me in the face. Like I was nothing, like I was less than nothing. I stood there, my hand coming up to my mouth, feeling the blood on my fingers. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me. This wasn't Terence, this wasn't my husband, this was a stranger who looked like him, but had none of his soul left. He was breathing hard, staring at his own hand like he couldn't believe what it had done. But he didn't apologize, he didn't cry or fall to his knees like he had those other times. He just looked at me, and his face was cold, empty. "Clean yourself up," he said. "You're bleeding on the floor." Then he turned and walked out like he just commented on the weather, like he hadn't just shattered everything we'd ever been. I heard him go upstairs, heard the bedroom door close, and I stood there in the kitchen, blood dripping from my lip onto my beautiful burgundy robe, and I felt something inside me break, but it wasn't my spirit. It was the chains I'd been wearing for 3 years, the chains of hope that he'd change, the chains of fear that I couldn't survive without him, the chains of believing that love meant enduring everything. Those chains broke, and what was left was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me had a swollen lip, blood on her chin, and a bruise already forming on her cheek. But her eyes were different. They were awake. I washed my face with cold water. The water stung my split lip, but I welcomed the pain. It was proof that I was still alive, still here. I pressed a cold cloth to my mouth until the bleeding stopped. Then I went back to the kitchen, and I made a decision, the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to call the police right then. I wasn't going to pack a bag and run to my sister's house because I knew Terence. He'd twist it. He'd say it was an accident. He'd cry and apologize and promise to change. And if I left right then in the middle of the night without proof, without witnesses, it would just be my word against his. And his word, despite everything, still carried weight in this community. He was the teacher who'd been falsely accused. He was the victim of a lying teenager. People felt sorry for him. They'd say I was exaggerating, that I was being dramatic, that marriages have rough patches. No, I needed to do this differently. I needed to do it in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. I needed witnesses. I needed proof. I needed to make sure that when he tried to claim I was overreacting, there would be people who'd seen my face, who'd heard the truth from my own mouth, who couldn't be swayed by his tears or his charm. So I started planning. Right there at midnight, with a split lip and a bruising cheek standing in my kitchen. I planned his downfall and mine too, in a way because I knew that doing this would mean the end of my marriage, the end of the life I'd built, the end of the woman I'd been for 18 years. But that woman was already dead. She died when his hand connected with her face. What I was doing now was building something new from the ashes. The first thing I did was take out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I made myself dial. I called my sister Denise first. She lives in Atlanta, 3 hours away. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. V, what's wrong? It's midnight. And I told her, God, I told her everything about the drinking, the anger, the control, the fear, about the grabbing and shoving, and tonight about the slap. My voice was remarkably steady as I talked like I was telling her about someone else's life. She didn't interrupt, just listened with these little gasps and sobs. When I finished, there was silence. Then she said, I'm coming. I'm getting in my car right now. No, I said, not now. Come in the morning. I need you here at 8 a.m. Can you do that? V, what are you planning? Justice, I said. I'm planning justice. Will you be here? I'll be there, she said. I'll leave at 5. I'll be there. The second call was harder. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Pastor Jerome's number. He'd married us. He'd counseled us through rough patches before things got really bad. He was a good man, a kind man, a man who believed in the sanctity of marriage, but also in the sanctity of human life. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Sister Vanessa, is everything all right? No, Pastor, I said. Everything is not all right. I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen. Can you do that? Of course, sister. And I told him too. Not everything. Not all 3 years, but enough. About Terran's anger, about his drinking, about tonight, about the bruise on my face, and the split lip, and the realization that if I didn't do something, there might come a night when I didn't walk away. When I finished, Pastor Jerome was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What do you need from me, Sister Vanessa? I need you to come to my house tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I need you to be a witness. I need you to see what he's done, and I need you to stand with me when I do what I have to do. I'll be there, he said without hesitation. I'll be there and I'll bring the weight of our faith community with me. You're not alone, sister. You've never been alone. The third call was to Lisa, Detective Lisa Hartwell, my friend from book club who I'd been avoiding for months. I pulled her card out of my wallet where I'd kept it all this time. I dialed the number. It rang, and I thought she might not answer, but then she did. Hartwell. Lisa, it's Vanessa. Vanessa Clark. There was a pause. Vanessa, it's late. What's wrong? Everything, I said, and I told her to. Everything. And Lisa, being a cop being trained for this, she went into professional mode immediately. Where is he now? Asleep upstairs. Are you safe right now? Do I need to send a car? I'm safe for now, but I need you to come tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I'm going to confront him with witnesses, and then I'm going to file charges. But I need you there, Vanessa. I should come now. I should arrest him now. No, I said firmly. This is my house, my life, and I need to do this my way. Please, Lisa, trust me, she sighed. 8 a.m. I'll be there. But if anything happens before then, you call 911 immediately. Promise me. I promise. After I hung up, I looked at the clock. It was almost 1 in the morning. I had 7 hours until they'd arrive. 7 hours to prepare. 7 hours to transform this house from my prison into my courtroom. I started cooking. I know it sounds strange, but I needed something to do, something to keep my hands busy and my mind focused. And there was something symbolic about it too. For 3 years, I'd cooked meals that he'd criticized or ignored, or tonight thrown against the wall. But this meal, this breakfast would be different. This would be the last meal I ever cooked for him, and it would be perfect. I took out my La Croquette Dutch oven. It was a wedding gift. This beautiful red enameled cast iron pot that we'd received from Terran's aunt. We'd barely used it because it was so nice. Too nice for everyday cooking, but nothing about today was going to be everyday. I made cheese grits from scratch, the kind my grandmother used to make with sharp white cheddar stirred in at the end, until it was creamy and rich. While the grits simmered, I made biscuits, real buttermilk biscuits. Cut out with my grandmother's old biscuit cutter, the tin one that's been in my family for generations. I used my KitchenAid mixer, the red one I'd bought myself for Christmas last year when Terran said it was too expensive. I'd used my own money I'd hidden away in small amounts over months. I made the dough, rolled it out, cut the biscuits and put them in the oven. The smell of them baking filled the house. Butter and buttermilk and hope, while the biscuit baked. I made bacon, thick-cut bacon, the expensive kind. I laid each strip carefully in my cast-iron skillet and listened to them sizzle. I scrambled eggs with cream the way my mother taught me. I sliced fresh fruit, arranged it on a platter. I programmed my Quez and Art coffee maker to brew at 7:45. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be ready. At around 3 a.m., I thought about the bruise on my face. I went to my bathroom and looked at my makeup drawer. I have this concealer, Dermablend Heavy Duty Coverage. I bought it online for $40 after seeing an ad. It promised to cover anything. I'd been using it to cover the fingerprint bruises on my arms when I wore short sleeves. I took it out, held it in my hand. I could cover the bruise on my face. I could hide what he'd done, make it easier for him, make it less shocking for the people coming. Then I threw it in the trash. The whole tube, $40 wasted, because no more hiding. No more making it easier for him. No more protecting him from the consequences of his actions. They needed to see. Pastor Jerome needed to see. Lisa needed to see. My sister needed to see. And Terence, most of all, Terence needed to see what he'd done in the cold light of day with no alcohol to blur it. No anger to justify it. Just the plain, undeniable truth written on my face. Around 4 a.m., I did something else. Something I'd been planning for weeks but hadn't had the courage to do. I'd ordered a Ring doorbell camera online. It had arrived a week ago, still in the box in my closet. I got it out, read the instructions, and installed it. It took me longer than it should have because I'm not great with technology, but I figured it out. I mounted it next to the front door, downloaded the app on my phone, and connected it. From now on, everything that happened at my front door would be recorded. Every conversation, every confrontation. I couldn't change the past, but I could document the future. I also set up my iPad on the bookshelf in the dining room, angled so it would record the table hidden behind some books, but recording. I needed proof. I needed evidence in case he tried to claim later that I was lying, that I was exaggerating. I'd have video, I'd have witnesses, I'd have everything I needed. By 5 a.m. the house was starting to wake up. The sky outside was turning from black to dark blue. I set the table with our wedding china, the plates we'd gotten as a gift, and kept in the cabinet because they were too special. Well, this was special. This was the most important breakfast of my entire life. I spread out my grandmother's tablecloth, the white one with the hand-embroidered edges, each stitch a labor of love. She'd been married for 50 years before my grandfather passed, but it had been a good marriage, a kind marriage. She would understand. I think she'd be proud. I arranged fresh flowers in the center of the table, gardenias from my garden, the same flowers from my wedding bouquet. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. These flowers represented promises made and promises broken. Around 6 a.m., I went upstairs to get dressed. I walked past the bedroom where Terence was sleeping. I could hear him snoring, that heavy, congested snore of someone who drank too much. The sound used to be endearing, proof that he was deeply asleep and at peace. Now it just sounded like everything else about him, ugly. I went to my room, the guest room that had become my sanctuary. I showered in my bathroom, washing away the dried blood, the tears, the fear. I stood under the hot water and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The grief of losing my marriage, the terror of what I was about to do, the relief that it would finally be over, the guilt that maybe I'd given up too soon. But then I touched my swollen lip, and I knew I hadn't given up too soon. I'd held on too long. I got out, dried off, and got dressed. I chose my navy dress carefully, the one I wore to my mother's funeral. It felt appropriate. This was a funeral of sorts. The death of Vanessa, the wife. The death of the woman who'd stayed silent. I was burying her today. I put on my grandmother's pearl earrings, pulled my hair back into a tight bun, looked at myself in the mirror one last time. The bruise was dark purple now, spreading across my cheek. My lip was swollen and split. I looked like a domestic violence victim, because that's what I was, and it was time to stop pretending otherwise. By 7:30, I was sitting at the head of the dining room table. The food was ready, set out in serving dishes. The coffee was brewed, filling the house with its rich aroma. Everything was in place. All I had to do was wait. At 7:50, I heard Terren's alarm go off upstairs. That annoying beep that had woken me up for 18 years. I heard him hit snooze. Then 5 minutes later, it went off again. This time he shut it off. I heard the bed creak as he got up, heard him go to the bathroom, heard the shower start. He was taking his time, no idea what was waiting for him downstairs. At 8:05 he came down. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, heavy and confident. The footsteps of a man who thought he'd put me in my place. The footsteps of a man who expected me to be cowering or crying or gone. He walked into the dining room, and I watched his face go through a series of expressions: confusion, surprise, calculation, and then satisfaction, that smile that spread across his face like poison, that smile that said he thought he'd won. He sat down, he took a biscuit, he said those words: "You finally learned, huh? A little discipline. And look, you remember how to be a wife." He laughed. He actually laughed. "This is how it should have been all along, baby. You just needed to understand who's in charge." And I waited. I sat there in my funeral dress with my split lip and my bruised face, and I waited for the doorbell to ring, and when it did, at exactly 8:12, when that simple ding-dong cut through the morning air, I stood up, I smoothed my dress, and I said I invited them. I walked to the door, and I opened it, and there they were, Detective Lisa Hartwell in her uniform, her badge shining in the morning sun, Pastor Jerome in his clergy collar, his face sad and serious, my sister Denise, tears already streaming down her face. They looked at me, really looked at me. They saw the bruise, they saw the split lip, and I saw the rage flash in their eyes, the righteous anger of people who love you and who have just seen proof that you've been hurt. We walked into the dining room together, and I will never forget the look on Terran's face. The colour drained away, the biscuit fell from his hand. And for the first time in 3 years he was afraid, not angry, not defensive, afraid. "Vanessa," he said, his voice strangled. What is this?" I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the table, flanked by my sister, my pastor, and a police officer. I stood tall, even though my back hurt from where I'd hit the counter. Even though my face throbbed, even though my heart was breaking, I stood tall because I had to. "This," I said, and my voice was cold and clear, "is the consequence you've been running from for 3 years, Terrence. This is the reckoning." And then I told him everything. I told him in front of witnesses. I told him how he'd changed, how the drinking started and the anger grew, how he isolated me and controlled me and made me feel like I was nothing. I told him about the first time he grabbed me and all the times after that. I told him about the fear I'd lived with, the eggshells I'd walked on, the pieces of myself I'd lost trying to keep him calm. And last night, I said, my voice steady even though tears were streaming down my face, "Last night you crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. You hit me, you looked me in the face, and you hit me, and then you walked away like it was nothing, like I was nothing." Terrence tried to speak. "Vanessa, please let me explain." "No," I cut him off. "No more explanations, no more excuses, no more blaming the alcohol, or the accusation, or me. You did this, you made these choices, and now you get to live with the consequences." Pastor Jerome stepped forward. "Brother Terrence," he said, and his voice was heavy with disappointment. "I've known you for 15 years. I married you and Sister Vanessa. I've prayed with you, counseled you, and I'm telling you now as your pastor and as a man of God, what you've done is unconscionable. It is unforgivable without true repentance. And right now, all I see is a man who's been caught. Not a man who's sorry." Terran's face crumpled. "Pastor, please. It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," Lisa said, stepping forward. Her voice was professional, detached. "Mr. Clark, my name is Detective Lisa Hartwell with Charleston PD. Mrs. Clark has made me aware of an assault that occurred last night at approximately midnight. An assault that left visible injuries." She gestured to my face. "I'm here to inform you that she will be filing formal charges." "You can't be serious," Terrence said, looking at me. "Vanessa, you can't do this. I'm your husband. This is a private matter. It stopped being private when you hit me." I said, "It stopped being private when your fist connected with my face. It stopped being private when I had to taste my own blood because of you." My sister Denise spoke up, her voice shaking with emotion. How could you hurt her like this? She loved you. She stood by you through everything. And this is how you repay her." "Denise, you don't understand," Terrence started. "I understand perfectly. Denise cut him off. I understand that my sister has been suffering in silence for 3 years. I understand that she's been covering bruises and making excuses and shrinking herself to make you comfortable. I understand that she almost let you destroy her completely, but that ends today. Terence looked around the table at all of us, and I could see the realization dawning on his face. There was no way out. No smooth talk. No tears. No promises would fix this. The evidence was on my face. The witnesses were in the room. The law was standing in uniform by the door. "Vanessa, please," he said, and his voice broke. "Please don't do this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly. I'll get help. I'll stop drinking. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't call the police. Please don't destroy my life." "I'm not destroying your life," I said quietly. "You destroyed it yourself. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. For once in 3 years, you're going to face real consequences." Lisa pulled out her handcuffs. "Mr. Clark, I need you to stand up and place your hands behind your back." "No," Terence said, panic flooding his face. "No, you can't arrest me. I'm a teacher. I have a job. People will find out. You should have thought about that before you put your hands on your wife," Lisa said. Her voice was still. "Stand up, Mr. Clark." He looked at me one more time, and I saw it. The moment he realized I wasn't going to save him, that I wasn't going to back down or change my mind or make excuses for him. The woman who would have done that, who had done that for 3 years, she was gone. And the woman standing in her place, the woman with the split lip and the bruised face and the spine of steel, she was someone new. "Stand up," Lisa said again. Terence stood slowly, shakily. He put his hands behind his back. Lisa cuffed him, and the click of the metal was the loudest sound in the room. She read him his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." I watched it happen, watched my husband of 18 years being arrested in our dining room, and I felt 1,000 things at once: grief for what we'd been, relief that it was over, fear of what came next, guilt that it had come to this, but most of all, I felt free. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. As Lisa led him toward the door, he turned to look at me. "You're going to regret this," he said. His voice was low, meant just for me. "You're going to be alone in this big house with nothing but your memories, and you're going to regret it." I met his eyes. "Maybe," I said, "maybe I will regret it, but I'll regret it alive. I'll regret it free. And that's more than I've had in 3 years. They took him away. I heard the front door open and close, heard the car start and drive away, and then the house was silent, that heavy, complete silence that comes after something monumental has happened. I stood there in the dining room, and my legs gave out. I sat down hard in the chair, and that's when I finally let myself fall apart. I put my face in my hands, and I sobbed. Huge, wrenching sobs that came from the deepest part of me. I cried for the marriage I'd lost, for the man I'd loved who'd become someone I feared, for the 3 years I'd spent being afraid, for the woman I'd been who'd let it happen. I cried for everything. Denise and Pastor Jerome stayed with me. Denise held me while I cried, and Pastor Jerome prayed. He prayed for my healing, for my strength, for my future. He prayed for Terence too, for his soul, for his redemption. And I let him, because even after everything, even after the bruise on my face, and the split lip, and the fear, I didn't hate Terence. I just couldn't love him anymore. Not the way he'd become. The days after were strange. The house felt enormous and empty. Every sound echoed. Every room held memories that now felt tainted. Denise stayed with me for a week. She helped me start the process of filing for divorce. She helped me change the locks on the doors. She helped me pack up Terrence's things and put them in the garage for him to collect later. The arrest made the news. Local teacher arrested on domestic violence charges. I stayed off social media, but Denise told me people were talking. Some were supportive, some were shocked, some predictably said I was overreacting, that every marriage has problems, that I should have tried harder to work it out. Those people I learned to ignore because they didn't see what I saw. They didn't live what I lived. Terence was charged with simple assault because it was a first offence. At least officially he got bail quickly. But there was a restraining order. He couldn't come within 500 feet of me, couldn't contact me except through lawyers. The school board put him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the case. His reputation, which he'd been so desperate to protect, was in tatters again. But this time he'd done it to himself. I started therapy. Dr. Simone Dubois, a trauma counselor who specializes in domestic violence. At first, I couldn't talk. I'd sit in her office and just cry. But slowly, over weeks and months, I started to find words. Started to unpack 3 years of fear and shame and misplaced guilt. She helped me see that I wasn't responsible for Terran's choices, that I couldn't have loved him enough to change him, that leaving wasn't failure, it was survival. I also started going to a support group. Women who'd been through what I'd been through. And in that room, hearing their stories, I realized I wasn't alone. There were others who understood the particular hell of loving someone who hurts you, who understood the guilt and the fear and the desperate hope that maybe this time would be different. We held each other up, those women and me. We shared our stories and our strength. And slowly, I started to heal. About 3 months after the arrest, I got a letter from Terrence. He was in court-mandated rehab and anger management. The letter was short. He said he was sober, that he was facing what he'd done, that he was sorry, truly sorry. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, but he wanted me to know that I was right, that I'd saved his life by stopping him, that if I hadn't done what I did, he might have kept going until one of us was dead. Read that letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer, because even though part of me was glad he was getting help, even though part of me still cared about what happened to him, I couldn't let him back into my life. Not ever. That door was closed, locked. The woman who might have opened it was gone. The divorce was finalized 6 months after the arrest. I got the house. He didn't fight me on it. I think by then he understood the magnitude of what he'd done, or maybe he was just too tired to fight. Either way, the house became mine, truly mine, and I started making it mine again. I painted the walls colors I liked. I rearranged the furniture. I threw out everything that reminded me of him. I kept only what brought me peace. I also made changes to make myself feel safe. I kept the Ring doorbell. I added more cameras, one in the backyard, one in the living room. I got a new security system with sensors on all the doors and windows. I got a better lock for the front door, one of those smart locks you can control from your phone. Some people might think it's paranoia, but to me, it's taking back control. It's saying that this is my space now, and I decide who gets to enter it. About a year after everything happened, I was finally ready to live again. Not just survive, but actually live. I got promoted at work. Head librarian, a position I'd been passed over for twice before because I'd been too distracted, too consumed by what was happening at home. I threw myself into the job. I started new programs for kids. I built partnerships with local schools. I remembered why I'd fallen in love with this work in the first place. I also bought something for myself, a small beach house. Well, more like a cottage on the outskirts of town. It's tiny, just a bedroom and a living room and a little kitchen, but it has a porch that faces the ocean, and I go there on weekends. I sit on that porch with a cup of coffee and a book, and I listen to the waves, and I feel at peace, real peace, the kind I didn't think I'd ever feel again. I've started dating again casually, carefully. I'm not ready for anything serious, and I might never be. But it's nice to remember that there are kind men in the world, men who listen when you talk, men who respect boundaries, men who understand that trust is earned, not demanded. About 18 months after the divorce, Terence asked to meet with me through his therapist, officially supervised. He wanted to apologize in person, part of his 12-step program or his therapy work. I'm not sure. I thought about it for a long time, asked Dr. Simone what she thought. She said it was up to me, that I didn't owe him anything, but that sometimes closure can be healing, so I agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. His therapist sat at a nearby table, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give us privacy. Terence looked different, thinner, older, sober. His eyes were clear in a way they hadn't been in years. He didn't make excuses. He said he was sorry. He said he'd been working on understanding why he'd become who he'd become, that losing his job and his reputation had broken something in him, but that he'd taken his brokenness out on me instead of dealing with it. He said he was on medication now, going to AA meetings 3 times a week, seeing a therapist twice a week, that he'd lost everything, his marriage, his career, his home, and that he deserved to lose it all. I listened, and when he was done, I said thank you. Thank you for apologizing, thank you for getting help. But I also told him that we would never be us again, that the man he used to be, and the woman I used to be, those people were gone, that what we had was destroyed, and there was no rebuilding it. He nodded, said he understood, said he hoped someday I could forgive him, but that he understood if I never did. And then he left. And I sat there with my coffee, and I realized I did forgive him. In a way, not the kind of forgiveness that means forgetting, not the kind that means reconciliation, but the kind that means I was releasing the hold that anger and pain had on me. I was letting it go so I could move forward without carrying it. Today I'm 53 years old, my face healed, the bruise faded to yellow and then disappeared. My lip healed, though there's a tiny scar if you look closely. A reminder not of what he did to me, but of what I did for myself, of the day I chose to save my own life. I'm not the woman I was before I met Terence. I'm not even the woman I was during those 3 years of fear. I'm someone new, someone stronger, someone who knows her worth, someone who knows that love without respect is just imprisonment with a prettier name. Someone who knows that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. That breakfast wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. Justice for every woman who's been told he didn't mean it. Justice for every person who thinks love means enduring violence. Justice for everyone who's ever felt trapped in their own home by someone who claimed to love them. I served Terence a breakfast he never expected. Witnesses, accountability, consequences, and I served myself something I'd forgotten I deserved. My life back, my peace back, myself back. I learnt something through all of this. I learnt that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be destroyed. Sometimes leaving isn't giving up, it's waking up. It's choosing life over loyalty to someone who's become your danger instead of your safety. I still live in Charleston, still work at the library, still tend my garden, but now I do it without fear, without looking over my shoulder, without wondering what mood someone will be in when they come home. I do it in peace. And that peace, that simple, beautiful peace, is worth more than any marriage certificate, any shared history, any hope that someone will change. To anyone watching this who's living what I lived, hear me, you deserve better, you deserve safety, you deserve respect, you deserve peace, and you don't have to wait until it gets as bad as it got for me. You can leave now, you can ask for help now, you can choose yourself now. Please, please choose yourself. What would you have done in my place? Would you have called the police that night? Would you have left years earlier? Would you have planned like I did? Comment below and let me know what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this message travels. To every woman who needs to hear this, you are not alone. I see you. I was you. And you can survive this. You can more than survive. You can thrive. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel or remember your own strength, please hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss stories of survival and strength. Your support means more than you know. It means that stories like mine matter, that women like me, like us, matter. On the screen you'll see other stories of people who chose themselves, people who drew a line and said no more, people who found their strength in the darkest moments. Click on one, watch it, learn from it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember this, you deserve peace. You don't need permission to choose it. Not from your husband, not from your family, not from anyone. You just need courage. And if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, you already have that courage. You just need to use it. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for bearing witness to my pain and my strength. Thank you for being part of my healing. Until the next story, remember, you are worthy, you are strong, and you deserve a life without fear. Choose yourself always. Always choose yourself.